Hello pilot and welcome to Basic Training. In this video I will show you everything you need to get up and flying in Volo Airsport. I will explain the controls, the way wingsuit flight mechanics work, and how to configure the game exactly to your liking. So without further ado, let's move on to your first flight. I'm using the Xbox controller to play, but you can also play the game using keyboard and mouse, and I'll show you how to do this later in this video. So I'll press the A button, start the game, and right now we are in the spawn selection screen, and here you can choose places to start your flight from. So I'll pick this middle one, press A, and start my first flight. And what I'll do to demonstrate is nothing. Let's see what happens. So we're picking up speed, we're gaining forward momentum, and we may or may not just make it over this little first peak. And this time we missed. Okay, but this is a very important point. If you do nothing, the pilot and the wingsuit will sort of try and maintain a stable heading and trajectory. So if you find yourself in a very busy situation and you want to recover, just do nothing for a little bit and see what happens. Oftentimes, you'll find that pilot relaxes and you'll regain stable flight. Okay, but we want control over this, right? So what I'll do is I'll press down on the stick because I want to go further up. I want to make it over this little hill. So let's see what happens. Oh no. Okay. 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 So I gained a lot of altitude, but right now what's happening is I'm still holding backwards on the stick, going forward a little bit, but I'm falling down. Oh no. I basically lost all forward momentum, and I'm about to crash. There we go. So this is another very important point about Volo Airsport. It requires delicate, subtle, and nuanced input. If you press all the way down, or forward, or left or right on the stick, chances are you'll very quickly lose control. So instead what I'll do is apply a gentle little bit of input on the stick, press back a little bit, and now we find that we can make it over this little peak and not lose all the speed in doing so, and achieve stable flight. So I want to stick to the terrain a little bit closer, so I'll press forward gently on the stick and let go. Now I want to go up a little bit again, so again, gently backwards on the stick. And let's say I want to go left, so I'll apply a gentle bit of pressure to the left and then let go. And what this does is it instigates a banking maneuver, and then as I let go, the pilot will drift back to a neutral heading. And then same for the right, apply a gentle bit of pressure, let go of the control stick, and ooh, that was close. A little bit to the left again, let it go. A little bit to the right again, let it go. And it becomes a balancing act. To do banking maneuvers, to do turning, you don't keep holding the control stick down. Rather, you start the maneuver with significant input, and then you almost let go entirely, only applying inputs to really stay in balance. The more nuanced you get with your input, the smoother and the more efficient your flying will be. Incidentally, the most important control that you have available to you is the left analog stick, or is the mouse, if you're playing by mouse and keyboard. It's how you do 90% of your flying. Now, other controls that you have are yaw left and right, which on my Xbox controller are the left and right triggers. But these don't work like you have them, like you have the controls available in actual aircraft. If you press them down, you'll just do this strange twirly motion. I wouldn't recommend flying with these at first, because they're really non-intuitive to use. But later on, you can try and work them into your routine to amplify motions or to do very strange tricks. I recommend experimenting with them a little bit later on, yeah? Let's move on to the physics of flight. So to the bottom left of the screen, you'll see speed, above ground, and glide ratio. Speed right now is in kilometers per hour, but you can configure it to be miles per hour as well. Speed is the most important resource that you have available to you in the game, and I speak as if it's a resource like in a strategy game or like it's money, and it isn't. But if you treat it kind of like it is, it becomes a very useful thing to play with. Having lots of speed is good, so I'll dive down a little bit gently, and as I do, you'll see I'll pick up speed. As I pick up speed, I'll also increase the amount of lift, aerodynamic lift, I'll have available to me, and that allows me to very quickly pull up a lot, gain a lot of altitude, or move left, or move right, in a very clear manner. Every input I do has immediate large effects. It means I have lots of options, so I can pull up out of a steep dive if it looks like I'm not about to make it over that cliff and still make it, that kind of thing. Whereas, if I have a low amount of speed, after pulling up a lot, eventually I'll start dropping down again. And right now I have very few options for avoiding the ground, so maintaining a good cruising speed, or even a little bit above cruising speed, is key to having options open to you. These are aerodynamic visualizers, and what they show is the amount of lift and drag working on each of your body parts. So these vertical lines pointing upwards into the sky are the lift vectors. They show you how much lift every body part is generating. And while I'm cruising, you can see it's very stable. There's a bit of turbulence going on, so you'll see them jittering up and down a little bit, but overall, very stable. Now, if I start pulling up gently, you can see that those lift vectors increased in size a little bit. And that means as I pulled backwards on the stick, more lift was being generated, and I went up. If I do too much of that, for example, if I pull the stick all the way back, you can see the lift vectors drop down to zero almost, and I just start falling like a brick. And that's because the wings and your other body parts, they have sort of an optimal angle at which they generate their maximum amount of lift. But if you pull up too much, the wings will stall and not generate any lift anymore. The other aerodynamic force that's of large importance, of course, is drag. And if I start braking again, you'll see these other lines extending in the opposite direction that I'm flying into. Those are the drag forces, and you can see they are the largest at the arm wings currently. And those are the forces that slow you down. It's the air resisting the motion in the direction that you're traveling into. And the more you increase your profile, the harder this drag will work. So right now I'm in cruising. I'm in a cruising orientation, and you'll see that the profile from the perspective of the wind is very small. If I start braking or pulling up, you can see that almost my entire body right now is fully affected by the force of the wind resistance. So for smooth and efficient flight and large distances, you want to keep this profile as small as possible and keep flying at this angle roughly. Now let's look at glide ratio. The glide ratio is the ratio between the amount of distance that you are moving forward versus the amount that you are falling down. So right now it's about 2.6, 2.7. Let's move it up to roughly 3.0. 3.0 means I'm moving 3 meters forward for every meter that I'm falling down. This is important because wingsuits, they fly by virtue of gravity pulling them down. Gravity is the force that is causing you to move in the first place. And gravity always points down. It's always pulling you down. And so the one thing you can't do in Volo Airsport, usually at least, is fly all the way back up. You have to always be flying down at least slightly. Otherwise, you'll be resisting gravity, and, well, as we discussed before, you can't keep that up for long. So, in the game, a glide ratio that's relatively easy to maintain, and it's very efficient, is about 3, like we're flying now. This is what you'd call a cruising glide ratio, which means I'm not losing too much speed. I can keep it fairly constant at about 180 kilometers an hour, and I can make it safely down the mountain. If I start flying down at a steep angle, I can pick up a lot of speed. My glide ratio drops because I'm going down fast. But now I have a lot of speed to spend, and if I now pull back up, I can almost get to a horizontal glide ratio where it'll start going towards infinity almost. But I'll lose my speed almost instantly and start falling again. These are the trade-offs you have to consider while flying, and an important tool to help you with this, actually let me keep the HUD on, but turn this off, is the trajectory visualizer. And this line, it'll show you roughly where you'll go if you do nothing for the next 5 seconds. So it's always tracing your path ahead of you and gives you an indication of where you'll end up, whether you'll be able to make it past that hill or around that corner. And it'll also show you, by virtue of this white dot, if you're on course to collide with anything. So I'll show it again from this angle. Pretty soon, yeah, right there, it'll start indicating that we're about to crash. Very useful tool for learning how to proximity fly at first. And I'm pretty good at this game, but I still have it on a lot of the time. So let's talk about some of the options we have for configuring the game. And we'll start with time and weather. In this menu, you can see we can turn on time simulation and weather simulation. And when I do that, you'll see in the background the weather changes immediately. We can also pick the current hour that we're at, the current day in the year, and very importantly, we can set the day length in minutes and the days per season. Now, what this means is that currently a day lasts only about a minute, so it's kind of like a time lapse, and we'll see that in a moment. And the days per season means if you set this to 10, it'll take 10 days to go from summer to winter and back. So right now that's also set to a single day, so weather is changing all the time like crazy. And let's see how that looks. We see the sun moving past like a time lapse. And we can see the snow actually vaporizing as we turn from winter into summer. And now it's turning into night. And it's really foggy. And I can't see a thing. And this is really interesting about the weather system. If you just let it run its course, you'll get into situations where you have very, very low visibility, and it completely changes the way you fly. Now, some people might find that very interesting. I personally find that a very interesting challenge, a nice variation on gameplay. But of course you can just turn it off. And when you turn these simulation options off, you can configure everything exactly the way you want it. So if you want no snow, just increase the altitude at which it appears, and the same for snowfall and fog. I don't like flying at night, so we'll turn it into day. We can also say simulate time, but I don't want night. And what this option will do is actually, once night occurs, once the sun dips below the horizon, it'll fast forward time until it's morning again in almost the blink of an eye. Right, that's it for the time and weather options. Let's look at the input options. Very important. So we have different defaults here for Xbox 360 keyboard only and keyboard and mouse. And you can also see this list here with all the individual actions in the game. There's quite a few, and the list will likely grow in size as we add more features to the game. But the more important ones for how you control the actual wingsuit are right here at the top. You can click on one and click any button or move any axis to reassign it. Very simple. Mouse sensitivity is for those just playing with mouse, because this doesn't actually influence how fast your cursor moves, just how fast you move your character around. Input speed scaling is active for all controls, whether you're playing by gamepad or not. And what it does is the faster you go, the smaller your muscle movements will be as you move the joystick. And especially if you're new to the game, I recommend leaving it all the way up to 1. That means it'll be harder to make mistakes as you go faster, because your inputs will automatically be smaller and more nuanced. Really helpful. Input gamma is relevant for joysticks and gamepads with analog inputs. And what this does is, the higher you set this, the more a larger range of your joystick will be used for smaller inputs, so it'll be easier to do subtler things. However, at the outer range, if you press the stick fully, it'll still have maximum range. For gamepads, leave it at 2 or thereabouts. If you're playing with a joystick, you can turn this down to, say, 1 and leave it at linear, because with a joystick you have so much room for making small maneuvers anyway that you don't really need this compensation. Lastly, dead zone is there to filter out any unwanted motion if you have your stick left idle. What can happen as your joystick ages is that if you leave it idle, it'll still generate inputs, and that's not what you want, and this is what helps you filter those out. So if you're not controlling the character and you still have some motion, turn this up a little bit and it might fix your problem. Lastly, let's go over some graphics options. First is resolution. Pick whatever is comfortable here. You can set the game in windowed mode or full screen. Field of view, let's try that actually and see what happens. It changes the camera angle or camera field of view that you have. The wider you set it, the more of the environment around you can see. And it can really help with a sense of speed, and it can really help you tell where you are, because the more you see of your surroundings, the better you can make decisions. However, if you set it to something more narrow, you often get an improved sense of depth perception. It seems more like you're there. It's a trade-off, and people like different things. Some people even get nauseous if they set this all the way to 60. So I recommend leaving it at the default of 85 degrees. Let's see. Let's go over some options that are really important to performance. So one of the things you can do if your performance is suffering a little bit is go to terrain resolution and turn that down. You'll see what happens. The geometry for the terrain will lower in resolution, so the graphics card has less work to do. And the primary thing you'll notice is that as you start flying, things will start popping more. But that's okay. If you turn it back up again, you won't actually notice much in terms of visual fidelity because it looks good with low and high resolution geometry, but you'll notice less popping. And especially because you're flying all the time and moving through things fast, it can help with your sense of immersion if things are not popping all the time. That's it for the basic flight tutorial, but one last thing. If you go to the menu and then go to follow us, you'll have a link here that goes to the forum if you click it. I highly recommend joining the community there and participating in a discussion. If you have any questions as to how some part of the game works and we haven't answered it either in this video or in the manual, ask it there. If you have feedback as to how the game works, how it runs, or whether something is working or not, or you have a particular feature that you'd like to see, let us know through the forums as well. With that said, this is the end of the tutorial. Happy flying!